There's been a lot of discussion recently amongst the caravanning community about what got us into caravanning, so I thought I'd join in and talk about what attracted us to this lifestyle and how we got to where we are today in terms of caravan ownership. The point of this channel is to share our experiences in the hope that they help other families of whatever size and shape and makeup to think about what would and what wouldn't work for them. So to that end, I've decided to split my waffle into a mini-series, grouped by mechanism, or tool if you like, because I see tents and campervans and motorhomes and caravans as just that, a tool for a really cool and fun life. It doesn't matter what you've got as long as you get out there, have a good time and learn something about yourself and the world as you go along. So whether you're just getting started or wondering whether to change to a new mode of camping, we hope sharing our experiences can help your planning. This first part is all about the wonderful, if it's a good temperature day and dry, or not so wonderful, if it's been cold and raining for days, world of tents. My parents had a bit of an occasional wanderlust, and so they went to all the shows and bought a caravan. Whilst we lived in a respectable and pleasant middle-class detached place in the country, my father was in the building trade, and thus for us, the early years at least, that meant the van was towed by his transit-sized van, which incidentally I also learned to drive in, with a piece of plywood strapped into the rear to make a bench seat for my sister and I, and some uncovered raw orange shedding and dusty foam as a nod to comfortable seating. Being the ever safety-conscious parent, we even had seatbelts secured to that plywood, though I've no idea how two little girls strapped to a 6-foot piece of plywood would have fared in the event of a crash, as it all depended on how well he'd actually secured the ply into the van. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Thankfully, at some point the family car, probably a sky blue Lada by that point, with a homemade plywood wind deflector bolted to the roof rack, who knows if it was the same wood that came out of the rear bench seat, became capable of towing the van, so we shrugged off the image that many caravan sites would look down their noses at today, and became semi-respectable. Somehow though, presumably because my father ran his own business and my mum absolutely refused to tow the van, it got used only for the annual 2-week summer holiday. And from the summer before I started senior school, and thus language lessons, that meant France. At that point in the community we lived in, most of our friends were off to Weymouth, an hour or so's drive away, for their summer holiday, so 2 weeks in France was the absolute epitome of poshness, even with a rusty work van. So between that and being really keen on outdoor stuff in the Girl Guides, where we camped in absolute style, building all sorts of furniture from sticks we found in the woods, and our leader routinely seen in her silk PJs enjoying a secret late-night glass of wine, which she never realised a few of us spotted her with, I was destined for a life of tenting and touring, but never totally roughing it. Why rough it like those dirty Boy Scouts when you can glamp in style, relying on your ability with sticks and twine? And unlike the Boy Scouts who had those nasty polyester tents, we girls preferred to heave probably our own body weights in canvas tent around a field. We preferred this for superior breathability and the habit of not killing the grass after we rolled our bed rolls and our ground sheets up after airing them each morning. My very first tent, the very first one I owned, was a tiny single-skinned 2-pole cheap thing from the cash and carry. It was £20 though of my own hard-earned cash, and I loved it. I knew when I bought it that it wasn't a serious tent, but proper tents were hundreds of pounds those days, so completely unreachable for me. And whilst out practicing for my patrol leader's camp permit in the driving rain of a local farmer's field, it leaked like a sieve. So I saved and saved for the next couple of years, and managed to buy myself a fabulous semi-geodesic Eurahike tent. This was an absolutely brilliant tent, and it was built for 3, so realistically it was spacious for 2 and their stuff. And it had a little storage vestibule at each end for boots and cooking stuff and so on. That tent served me and friends really well. Went to the Glastonbury Festival and took me on my first real holiday away from home, down to Devon with some friends. Then, eventually, along came Dad on a mission, who very glamorously had a job and thus a car of his own. And thus his car and my little tent took us to France for his very first ever camping experience. Dad on a Mission is a 5-star hotel loving city boy, and thus the idea of being outdoors in nature in a tent of all things fills him with absolute dread. Anyway, after uni, after jobs for both of us came along, between saving madly for a house deposit and wanting to impress in our new job roles, holidays were spent visiting parents or the odd weekend here and there in B&Bs. Weddings, and then saving for a once-in-a-lifetime pre-child, more part-time study trip to Peru took precedence over heading off in a tent. Then eventually along came son number 1, and my thoughts turned to how on earth am I going to stay in hotels on holidays when we'd have to stick to a regimented structure. If they had paper-thin walls, how on earth the other guests were going to cope with a tiny one next door. So my mind went back to camping and getting out there into nature. Dad on a mission couldn't think of anything worse. There wasn't room for all 3 of us in our little blue and yellow tent, as we really needed somewhere where we could sit under cover. And so as a bit of a test run, we borrowed my sister's slightly more spacious 4-man tunnel tent, and off we went for our very first camping holiday as a family, when little one hadn't even yet had his first birthday. It was going pretty well, though it did feel a bit colder than I remembered camping. I was still studying part-time, so no more camping happened for a couple of years before son number 2 came along. Dealing with a pair of little ones in an otherwise calm hotel, for the huge costs which seemed to be apparent if you wanted to hire a cottage somewhere, meant that my mind went back to tents. So as he grew out of his baby car seat and we were forced to swap cars into a sensible family estate, we also bought a massive 5-berth, still fairly cheap tent from Go Outdoors, and a side awning to separate off a kitchen eating area from a huge carpeted indoor play space that they could crawl around in, and a separate sleeping space. Again, I opted for a semi-geodesic front section design, as this was always super stable and great for head height, not that we need head height. This was a brilliant tent once it was all set up, but my goodness it was difficult to put together. The poles were under huge tension, and so controlling 2 toddlers and having to work out how to set the tent up was hard work. It seemed to take forever, and we always seemed to be packing up or setting up in the rain. And so it was really a palaver every time we tried to go anywhere, and still felt rather cold during the nights or far too hot in the early mornings because of course it was that polyester material. Technology at the time was pole tents, polyester tents and airbeds. And now it was really apparent that the need to easily access water, to have it on hand for hand washing and so on. It occurred to me that actually we probably need to get a trailer to carry all of our stuff. And if we needed a trailer, I reasoned why didn't we look at trailer tents? Then at least we wouldn't have to store an empty trailer on our pitch once we'd arrived and set up. Had air tents been affordable in those days, we might have gone in that direction. So we looked around and saw that we could get something called a folding camper, which was rather like a caravan base with running water and an onboard loo, which is incredibly helpful for those with little ones. We bought one of those, and in the next episode will be all about that. So having said that, although we moved up through the magnitude of our camping units, we've always ensured that we've got a simple tent to hand. So alongside the folding camper, we bought an absolutely beautiful Solis 400 from Van Gogh. This is absolutely the best tent I've ever owned. It's very spacious for 3 on those incredibly expensive Outwell Dreamboat self-inflating luxury mattresses, which are considerably warmer than an airbed, but many, many times the price. And in polycotton it feels so nice inside and is wonderfully breathable. I'll do a more in-depth review on this at some point in the future. We've also bought a little Decathlon Fresh and Black pop-up tent, which the eldest now uses as a solo retreat when his brother's getting on his nerves or when he wants to be out on his own, when we're away in the warmer months and the site we're on permits pup tents. For such a basic cheap tent, I'm also really impressed with this. So, conclusions about tents from a tent. Well, there's nothing quite like sleeping under canvas or even polyester for that real adventure back to nature feeling. There's also nothing like really enjoying your holiday because you've had a fantastically comfortable night's sleep. And you've awoken refreshed and you've not had to trek halfway across the field in your pyjamas to have a wee in the middle of the night. Tents are relatively cheap, so it's a great way to find out whether you like the lifestyle itself. Relative, of course, to the cost of a camper van or a motorhome or a caravan or something like that, because some of the top-end tents are around the £1,500 mark. But it's a great way of testing out whether this is the sort of thing you're interested in, or actually whether you're a once-a-year package holiday in the sun type of person. And if you are, that's absolutely fine. This is all about finding what works for you, where's you're happy. Personally, our experience has been that certainly for families with little ones, the whole rigmarole of getting stuff loaded and the sheer amount of volume of stuff you need for little kids is phenomenal. So getting all the camping stuff, getting all the kids stuff loaded in the car for a relatively short break starts to become a little tiresome after a while, and actually you end up going away far fewer times than you expect to. Having said that, if the type of holidays you're interested in are a whole week or 2 weeks away somewhere very warm and pleasant, then a tent can be absolutely a fantastic and very accessible way to do that. So even if you kit yourself out with the top of the range stuff, for the really best to make a super comfortable home away from home, things that work really, really well for your family, then you can be looking at something like £5,000 to be really, really well set up. And so the time taken and the money invested, if they're really viewed as an investment, can be really, really worth it for this type of holiday. Because today's big family tents can provide you with a massive living area that's really good and really usable regardless of the weather itself, whatever the weather throws at you. So whilst the tent itself can be heavy, by the time you've rolled it out of the car or managed to get it out of the trailer, all you have to do is stretch it out, perhaps peg the corners, and then effectively one person can put the tent up really by themselves, leaving, if you've got 2 adults, the other one to go off and supervise the little ones, or certainly making it at least viable for a single parent on their own to actually be able to take the kids camping. So it's far easier than ever to be able to set up these big family tents, and that's led to real revolutions in design and tents getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So always check that the tent you're planning to get actually matches up with some of the sites you're interested in going to, because some sites are starting to get restrictive about what size tents they'll take. So if this is the sort of setup you're interested in, really, really view your kit as an investment. Buy it once, buy good quality, and really think about what works for you. Not just now, but also in, say, 5 or 10 years' time, if that's what you're planning the investment over. So our kids aren't teenagers yet, but I'm planning for that period in their life, for things that work now, for this season, things that suit them as they are now, but also for the next few years, so that I don't have to go and buy again in a few years' time. For example, you might want to invest in a really good quality trailer, and you'll probably be surprised at quite what the size trailer you might need. It can make it so much easier to travel to the place you want to go to by making the car much more spacious. Also remember though to check out the towing laws. You'll need to drive differently when you've got a trailer on the back, so please be aware of what you need to be doing. As I said, all this top-end kit will probably end up setting a family back in the region of about £5,000. But once you've done those test runs, perhaps with friends' equipment, you'll certainly feel like you're out there in nature, and you'll be super comfortable, so you should enjoy it much more than if you make an investment in some cheap kit and just hate it. So think very carefully about what you buy, and hopefully it lasts a long time, so it'll provide much better value in the end. The other thing I've noticed recently about tents is there seems to be a real resurgence in the real back to basics, perhaps woodland forest type camping areas that only allow tents. They seem though to me to be appealing to the inner survivalist in perhaps the upper and the very well-off middle classes, because frankly some of them are extortionate, and I can only think they're trying to appeal to people trying to escape their office jobs through finding their inner Bear Grylls or their inner Ray Mears, because they are eye-wateringly expensive, some of them. So in conclusion, tents are absolutely brilliant in some circumstances, and in other circumstances they're an absolute pain in the, back or the head, especially after a bad night's sleep, even if you're young and healthy. So that's a quick summary and some thoughts on tents. I'll do a proper full analysis as the last episode in this series, where I'll think about our options and how they matched up with what we were trying to do at the time, and so what styles of units worked for what type of camping. Or in other words, trying to answer the question, should I buy a tent or a camper van or a motorhome or a caravan? So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next part. Bye for now.